Look, one, I am totally amused by Republican hysteria about all of this. They are deeply scared about the symbolism of this and what it means. We are subjected to a bunch of faux outrage in order to match the levels of outrage. Look, I think Republicans are deeply angry at a country that they see slipping away. And I think at the heart of that is a bunch of fear. But I also think that their outrage is pure theater. They know that this man committed these high crimes and misdemeanors. He admitted to them on the television. We all saw it with our own two eyes. And I think that they're really trying to ask Americans not to trust themselves, not to trust our own moral compass about what is right and what is wrong. I think it's egregious the way that they're willing to go along with the idea that it's fine for foreign governments to interfere in American affairs. And they're trying to normalize that. But the thing that is more appalling is that they are trying to normalize it with Trump as the exception. So they are trying to say that under no other president would this be okay, but for Trump, everything is fine. And there's nothing that this man is ultimately doing for them. He's a sinking ship. He takes everyone down with him. All of these folks around him have been arrested. And yet these Republicans, the party of family values, the party that the Christian right loves, is really telling the American public that it's okay for our president to lie. It's okay for him to cheat. It's okay for him to steal. And look, and I, too, am a church girl, and we say that it's the devil who lies, cheats, and steals. And so they're really saying that it's okay for Donald Trump to really embody the worst of any kind of moral values and to, frankly, act like a devil. And I know I'm being provocative, but I'm trying to talk to them in a language that they understand, which is a language of a sort of Christian morality, which they have totally
there are those who would say that you're being unfair to any politician when you call them the devil. We have had Trump allies on the show, and we welcome them back if they want to respond. They have a president who was disparaging Greta Thunberg, a child who happens to be on the spectrum.
That's right.
So, as you say, it's going both ways politically. I just mentioned that because we bring all views here. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.